Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to head over to Canada once again, and we're going to return to a brewery that has featured on the channel a good number of times before. I've had some really nice beers from these guys over the last couple of years, and I would go as far as saying that these guys are potentially one of the most recognisable Canadian craft breweries worldwide. They've certainly been pushing their exports over the last little while, and the beers that we get from them over here in Europe are mainly New England hazy IPAs and, you know, the big fruity juicy sours like the Gozes and the Berliner Weisses and things like that. And I've had nice examples of both of those from this brewery, but I know they do a few different styles as well that we just don't seem to get over here. But yeah, always cool to review some Canadian beers for you here on the channel. As I've told you before, Canadian beer is quite difficult to get a hold of unless you're actually in Canada itself, but hopefully this is the start of it starting to get out there a little bit more. We've had a few other Canadian breweries making their way over to Scandinavia over the last little while, but these guys have been around for quite a bit of time actually. This will be my 10th or so review involving this brewery, and I think my 5th dedicated review to this brewery as well, or my 5th solo brewery beer review, I guess we could say. But yeah, certainly looking forward to this one, so let's see how we get on with it then. For this review, we are going to go to the city of Hamilton in the province of Ontario in eastern Canada, and we're going to have a look at yet another beer from Collective Arts Brewing. So this particular beer is called Good Monster. It comes in at 8% ABV, and this one is a double imperial hazy New England, whatever you want to call it, IPA. And this beer was released here in Sweden through Systembolaget as part of the Tillfällig temporary assortment on the 4th, I think it was, of May 2021. But yeah, this is my first dedicated review to this brewery in about a year, maybe a little bit more than that. And I have had one or two collaborations involving Collective Arts over the last few years, so definitely nice to feature them here on the channel once again. And as always, I hope that you guys enjoy my take on this beer. So let's see how we get on then. As always with my reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Collective Arts Brewing before, and like I said, we will no doubt add more to that list in the near future. I need to try one or two more of their sours, I would think, but there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel, of course, has a geography-based tagging system, so you can go into the homepage and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever it is you happen to be interested in. Do check out the playlist of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the Canadian beers that I've reviewed for you. That's being added to whenever I get the chance, not as often as I would like right enough, so hopefully we can fix that in the future. But as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, to tell you a little bit about Collective Arts Brewing then, on to my brewery notes. So Collective Arts Brewing, as I've mentioned to you already, are based in Hamilton in Ontario in eastern Canada, and the company was founded back in 2013 by Matt Johnson and Bob Russell. So Matt comes from a marketing background, and he'd worked in the beer industry for a number of years, also with Moosehead, one of the big Canadian macro lager producers, while Bob on the other hand came from a branding background and he ran his own businesses. But the brewery itself is based in, or the original brewery I guess we should say now, the original brewery is based in the former brewery of Lakeport Brewing Company, which is leased from the Hamilton Port Authority, and they share this facility with Nickelbrook Brewing, and it's known as the Arts and Science Brewery. The current brewmaster at the brewery is Ryan Morrow, and he was also the brewmaster for Nickelbrook Brewing from 2006 until 2019, when he decided he was going to dedicate himself full-time to Collective Arts Brewing. But the whole idea behind this brewery was apparently to bring together local artists and musicians, filmmakers and photographers and things like that through the sociability of craft beer, hence the name Collective Arts Brewing. But they've got a number of art initiatives, and over the years they've paid a number of musicians, artists and various other people, photographers and things like that, for their contributions to like live nights and brewery artwork and beer artwork and all of these kind of things. So they really do help local artists and things earn a living, which is pretty cool. But these days they've got a second brewery in Toronto which opened up in 2020, and this is in the Trinity Bellwoods district of the city. But the brewery is equipped with a 10-litre brew kit and it has a tap room and restaurant, and like the brewery in Hamilton, it also features a lot of work from different local artists, and it looks pretty cool, I have to say, actually. So you can go onto their website and check out a few pictures of that. But when I do make it over to Canada next time, I want to go and visit the original Hamilton one, of course. From what I gather, the tap room and things in the place in Hamilton is very, very small. But the Toronto one seems to be a lot bigger and things like that. And they had some really interesting food on the menu and stuff there. But it would be cool to go and visit the one in Hamilton, I think, as the original one. But as I say, these guys are quite a prolific brewery. They produce lots of different beers. As of May 2021, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced around 105 different kinds of beer, according to Untappd. But yeah, that's all I can really tell you about Collective Arts Brewing for the moment. If you want to learn more about these guys, as I said, you can check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on. I think the two separate breweries, the Hamilton and the Toronto one, have different pages and things like that, so just be aware of that. But you can also check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, that's it for your history section of this video then. I think this will be my 4th or 5th IPA that I've done from these guys. I think all of the dedicated reviews that I've done from this brewery, in fact, might well be IPAs. The first one was the Radio the Mothership, then we had the IPA 7 and 8, I think we had another IPA after that, if I remember rightly, and now we have this one. So yeah, I think all 5 or so of the dedicated reviews I've done have been IPAs, so I need to see about something a little bit sour or whatever from them the next time, or maybe a stout or something like that. But yeah, as I say, check out all the different beers that they've done. I've certainly had very good experiences with this brewery over the last little while, and the Canadian beer tubers tell me that these guys are very highly rated over there as well. So if you are interested in keeping more up to date with the Canadian beer scene, make sure you check out the likes of Lee Russell, who is one of the OG beer tubers of all time, we should say. There's also Red Beer does some really nice stuff, Off the 10th, In the Basement beer reviews. Albino Rhino, of course, he's Canadian, but I always forget about him because he used to live very close to the border in Niagara, actually. But yeah, there's a lot of really good Canadian beer tubers out there, so do go and check out some of those ones that I've mentioned, and they'll keep you more up to date with what's going on in Canada, of course. But yeah, let's crack on then and have a little look at this beer and see what it has in store for us. So as you can see, and as you usually get from Collective Arts, you've got that lovely artwork on this one. I can see there's a signature on this, but I have no idea whose signature that is, but you can see it does look very, very nice. Does it have it in normal text? Actually, yeah, it does. Dan Dipple, Liverpool, New York, America. So yeah, it's actually an American artist. I thought it was, they always tried to keep them, you know, fairly local in Ontario or Canada or whatever. So yeah, the art on this one is from an American artist, and I think what they do, I've seen them with a couple of their beers, Radio the Mothership, which seems to be a regular over here in Systembolaget in Sweden. You'll quite often find it with different artwork and things, actually, which is a little bit confusing, I have to say. But yeah, I think they switch up the artwork on their different beers and things like that. So just be aware of that. You might find the same beer with different artwork from these guys. But yeah, as I said, this beer is called Good Monster. It comes in at 8% ABV, New England Hazy, Imperial Double, whatever you want to call it, IPA. And this one apparently is hopped with Mosaic, Citra, Simcoe and Amarillo. So it does have a really nice, it does have a very, very nice kind of old school sort of hop bill to it. So yeah, let's get this guy out then and we'll get on with the tasting then. I think I paid maybe about 40 Swedish kroners for this, something like that. And maybe, in fact, no, I think it was about 45. So I paid 45 Swedish kroners for this one. So that's €4.50, about £4 sterling, maybe about $5.50 American. So does that make it about $6 Canadian, perhaps? Something like that. But yeah, that's one of the things about these Collective Arts beers. For what they are, they're always pretty damn cheap, actually. I don't know why we get these ones so cheap, in fact. So yeah, always cool anyway. But yeah, 473 milliliter can, this one, which is 1 American pint. So yeah, let's get this guy out then and we'll get on with the tasting. I always usually make fun of the American breweries for using these kind of fluid ounce systems and stuff like that. I've never understood them. Whereas, yeah, our metric system that we use in Europe, and I mean, the Asians use that as well, of course, it's based on water. It just makes more sense. But I had some of the Americans comment, we like our freedom units, which I thought was quite funny. But, yeah, pretty cool at least. Anyway, let's just put the rest of it in. Might as well, because the head on this one isn't going too crazy. But yeah, it's lined up again, so then my OCD is happy. But yeah, before the head disappears, you can see that this beer's poured with about a half finger of quite a bumpy white head actually. That I'm sure is going to fade away to just be a very kind of thin foamy layer. But yeah, overall it looks pretty nice, I have to say. Nothing particularly surprising about this beer when you consider what style it is, an 8% New England Hazy Double IPA. So if we shine the light through this one, it's a lovely very bright yellow. It certainly looks a little bit like a kind of mango juice, to be honest with you. And as I always say, I like comparing the New England IPAs to different fruit juices because that's really just what they remind me of. This one, just looking at the camera, this one is very slightly paler than it appears on camera to the naked eye. But yeah, I think a mango juice is a very good way to kind of describe the colour of this one. But remember, the colour of your beer is dependent on a couple of different things. One, the type of malts that you use. Two, the length of your wort boil. The longer you boil the wort, the more the sugar caramelizes, and then thus you get a darker beer. But it depends in the first instance on exactly what malts you're using. Adjuncts and barrel aging, of course, will play a role in there as well, but those factors are not in play with this particular beer. And you know, a New England double IPA like this is probably going to undergo a boil of like 70 to 90 minutes, something like that. It's a bit more obvious in terms of the West Coast IPAs and things. When you start playing around with the boil and stuff, it's a bit harder to tell in the New England IPAs. But yeah, the level of haze on this one for an 8%er is kind of what you would expect. I would say it's not the soupiest and gloopiest 8%er that I've come across, but it does have a fairly impressive level of haze. The haze level, of course, is dependent on the oats, the wheat, and the yeasty content. But certainly, as I say, not the soupiest and gloopiest I've come across, but for an 8%er, this one is kind of what you'd expect, to be honest with you. But yeah, one or two big bubbles sticking towards the side of the glass, a few little ones going up towards the bottom of the surface there, and overall it looks really nice. You can see the head has completely disappeared almost, just a few kind of wispy layers there and a nice little bit of a foamy ring around the edge of the glass. But yeah, nothing particularly surprising about this beer in terms of its appearance when you consider what style it is, pardon me. So yeah, let's take a closer look at the aroma and see how we get on. I was a little bit eager with this one earlier. I took a little sniff, but yeah, certainly smells very nice. So yeah, the aroma of this one is very nice. It's actually a very soft smelling New England IPA, this one for sure. It's really interesting. As I've told you before, with these New England IPAs, I think there's like 6 different directions you can take these in. They can be more sort of yeasty and farmhousey. They can be sort of rye and kind of more grainy leaning, if you like. They can be a little bit more wheaty and bitey, oaty and creamy, you know, more bready and barley malt leaning, or they can also be a little bit more sort of brown sugary, you know, with a bit of Cara Munich or Pilsner malt or, you know, something like that in them. But this one really just comes across as very, very soft actually, and it really smells like it leans more towards a kind of barley malt rather than anything. It's got a lovely soft kind of white bready character to it. You do get a wee hint of wheat, of course, and you do get a little bit of an oaty character to it, but to me this one really smells as if it's more kind of barley malt leaning than anything else. So yeah, I've always said in these reviews, a lot of people kind of you know, sort of look over the malt base in these beers in favour of, you know, they look over the malt base in these beers in favour of the hops and things, and I think that's a terrible shame because, you know, having a good malt base is really important for these. But it says on the side here, yeah, this one does have wheat and oats in it. It gives you tasting notes as well, so I'm not going to look at that. But yeah, it certainly comes across really nice. But my main impression of this beer is a big, soft, kind of barley malt leaning, bready, juicy IPA. That's what I would say my first impression of this one is. But yeah, all the hops in this one, of course, incidentally, are, you know, old school ones. I mean, Mosaic. All of them are American. Mosaic's about 14% alpha acid, juicy tangerines mainly. Citra is a lovely kind of mango note with quite a bit of a citrusy character, again about 14% alpha acid. Simcoe in a New England IPA is going to give you a lot of soft, juicy passion fruit, which is about 12% alpha acid. Then Amarillo has a lovely, big, oily and citrusy orangey zest to it, and I think that's about 12% alpha acid as well. So these hops are all ones that I'm familiar with, so this one will come across as quite an old school New England IPA. And it works. It does work very, very nicely. But let's just try and describe the aroma of this one a little bit more for you. So yeah, when you sugar the beer up a little bit, you'll get a wee bit more of the kind of wheaty bitiness at the back of the nose. But as I say, overall, it's a really soft, big, white bready note you're getting out of this one. A lot of barley malt for me. You can smell a wee bit of the smoothness of the oats in there coming out. And, you know, potentially there's just a little hint of a very slight butter candy note to this one, but that is very, very minimal. But when you're talking 8% alcohol, it's not uncommon that you're going to find a little bit of that, of course. But yeah, the malty base in this one is quite straight shooting. White bread, wee bit of a bread crusty note as well, of course, a bit of wheaty bitiness and some smooth oaty characters. But yeah, on the hoppy side of things then, there's a wee, on the green side of things, you've got a little touch of earthiness in there. That's most likely to come from the Mosaic. There's a good little bit of floral character in there. It doesn't come across as overly sort of spicy or bitter or anything like that, but remember, a New England IPA relies on late edition hops rather than early edition hops like the West Coasters. Early edition hops are more responsible, of course, for your bitterness, and as you go through the wort boil, you've got a gradual trade-off in terms of bitterness. You know, it sort of drops off and you get more flavour and aroma out of them. New England IPAs, of course, are mainly late edition hops, like I say. But yeah, you've got a nice little bit of a floral character out of this one. Not too pungent, not too deep, just, you know, quite nice and bright. And you've got a little touch of grassiness. You've got a little touch of grassiness out of this beer as well. There's a wee bit of zestiness in there, which I would suspect is most likely to come from the Amarillo, potentially a little bit from the Citra. But yeah, the green component for me on this one, if you take it in a little bit more deeply, you will get a kind of brighter and slightly more pungent floral aromaticity. But overall, I think it's quite a soft green component that comes out of this one. I think it's a very chilled out beer, this one, actually. So yeah, I think that covers the green component pretty well, to be honest with you. But yeah, on the fruity side of things, if you know these hops, it is pretty much what you'd expect. You get a little bit of a kind of more pungent passion fruit out of this one, which the more pungent passion fruit is going to come from the Citra. Absolutely. You get a bit of a kind of softer passion fruit in there as well, which is the Simcoe. Lovely big kind of juicy mango, which again comes from the Citra. There's one or two sort of apricot, papaya, lighter elements in there, which is probably going to come, yeah, again, from the Citra. Citra is probably the most complex hop out of all the ones in here. Absolutely. I get a wee bit of pineapple, which I think will come maybe from the Mosaic, but then you've got a lovely big orangey character to this one. You can smell the sort of more oily oranges from the Amarillo underneath, and you can smell the brighter tangerine elements as well, which is the Mosaic, like I say, and then there's a wee bit of a lemon limey character in there coming out from the Citra. So yeah, you've got a wee bit of everything coming out in this one. I think it's actually quite well balanced between those tropical notes as well. This whole beer, as I say, you have to take the aroma in quite deeply to get a real pungency out of it, but I mean, if you're just sort of kind of passively smelling it, it comes across as very relaxed and just very chilled almost, actually. So yeah, I can certainly appreciate how that one goes together. So yeah, the aroma in this beer is very nice, actually. I'm just curious to see whether this translates into the actual flavour itself. So yeah, take a little bit of time to enjoy the aroma of the beer before you get into it, certainly. But I think it's about time that we try this one now. So this one is the Good Monster, an 8% New England hazy imperial double, whatever you want to call it, IPA from Collective Arts Brewing in Hamilton and Toronto in Ontario over in Canada. Let's get stuck into this one. Slàinte, skål, cheers. Certainly does have a wee bit more bite to it on the flavour. I would say, but the aftertaste, absolutely, it mellows out a wee bit more, definitely. But it's a lovely, first impressions again is, it's a lovely beer, this one. It doesn't do anything surprising, we will say that, but you know, there's so many New Englands out there these days, it's kind of hard to surprise with this style these days, but yeah. But yeah, it's absolutely solid. I mean, I'm just trying to remember if this is the heaviest IPA that I've had from them. It could well be. I know that the first, the Radio, the Mothership, I can't remember the exact percentage of that, but that was a double IPA, and I think the other 3 IPAs we've had, at least the 6 and the 7, I think they were single IPAs, but I can't remember whether the last one was a double IPA as well. But this one, out of all the Collective Arts ones that I've had, this one certainly feels the booziest. But the question would be, how fresh is this one exactly? Because with a New England IPA, you can usually tell a little bit because the kind of oats thicken up, the wheat thickens up a wee bit, and you can just tell when they're not madly fresh. But the Collective Arts stuff that we get always seems to be in like pretty decent condition. And of course, you want these beers to kind of sit in the can for maybe 2 weeks or so before you drink them. Otherwise, you just get a lot of green out of them. New England IPAs need a little bit of time to kind of mellow out, if you like. But this one does seem as if it's in fairly good condition. So yeah. But it certainly strikes me, it just certainly feels a little bit more boozy than some of the other ones that I've come across. And that, my impression of it is that could well be because it's a sort of barley malt leaning one. Usually the oats, I think, and some of the wheat, the bitiness of the wheat will cover the alcohol and the sort of thickness of the oats. Whereas, yeah, this is a more barley malt leaning one, and it doesn't have a sort of, you know, Caramunich or a crystal or something like that in there to give you that wee brown sugary element to it. This one is a very Bready leaning New England IPA, so potentially that's why it just feels a little bit more kind of boozy in a sense. But again, as I say, I like this beer. You're not going to get a bad IPA from Collective Arts in my experience. But yeah, let's try and break this beer down for you a little bit more. That's just my kind of first impression. But straight away with this beer, right across the middle of the palate, you get that nice soft white bready character coming out of it. That just blankets the middle of your tongue. And yeah, kind of sitting on top of that, or the further you go into the aftertaste, I should say, that sort of breadiness, that soft white breadiness just thickens out a little bit. Doesn't get madly thick, but it just feels quite fresh and kind of fluffy in a sense. But if you go towards the front of that middle third of your palate and the back of the middle third of your palate, you will get a few little bread crusty elements in there too. But on top of the soft white bread, you get a wee bit of a more kind of smooth oaty character. The oats don't come across as madly thick in this. And in the very centre of your palate, you do get just a wee touch of that Werther's Original, very slight butter candy sort of thing, and that's the kind of booziness of the beer coming out as well, of course. So yeah, that's, as I say, in the dead centre of your palate there. But that's the middle third of your palate in this one. The malty side of this beer is quite straight shooting, to be honest with you. But yeah, I like it, absolutely. But yeah, on the border region then between middle third and back third of your palate, you get a wee bit of a kind of build up on this one again. You do get a wee bit of that kind of bready build up there and a wee bit of a bread crust. But as you move into that back third of your palate, the beer is distinctly more kind of wheaty and bitey. Actually, I do find that the beer on the back third of your tongue is definitely a little bit more kind of wheaty and bitey. So yeah, that's interesting for sure in this one, absolutely. Yeah, and sitting on top of that kind of wheaty aspect of the beer, you can feel the yeastiness just sort of builds up a little bit more. You can feel those airy, yeasty qualities just coming out of the beer. So yeah. So when you start at the back of the beer, it does feel a little bit thicker. It's not the most, it doesn't feel, this beer doesn't feel as if it has such a big yeasty component to it. compared to some of the other ones that I've had. But yeah, on the back third of your palate, the flavour kind of starts off like this, and then it condenses down gradually, and as you go into the middle third of your palate, the flavours, the middle third of your palate is quite, you know, condensed down, and you can just feel a little bit of the booziness there too. But yeah, it works. It absolutely does work. But yeah, on the hoppy side of things, then again, this is really interesting actually. It's what you'd expect, but the hoppy characters in this beer, the green component is a lot more kind of pungent in the flavour than the aroma would have you believe. So yeah, back corners of the palate, you've got a nice little bit of earthiness there, and as you move further forward, the green component, the floral aromaticity really comes out of it more and more and more, and as you reach the front corners of the palate, it does actually develop a nice little bit of spiciness to it. So yeah. And remember, as you you know, with all of these hops, they are quite high alpha acid hops, so they will you know, if you use them as early addition hops as well, they are going to give you a good little bit of spiciness there, but not overly much. Round the front curve of the palate, you get a little touch of a kind of grassy quality out of it, and it does have a wee bit of zestiness in there. So yeah, that kind of suits the slightly more citrusy aspect that this beer kind of shows as well. But the green component for me works quite nicely, and the slightly more pronounced floral aromaticity builds a good bridge with the wheaty back third of your palate too. So yeah, I like how this one, I do like how this one goes together. But yeah, front third of your palate then, as I always say, this is where you get the fruity components of the beer. On that border region between front third and middle third of your palate, again you get a wee bit of a kind of more bready build up there, and a bit of a bread crusty kind of thing, but the base of that front third of your palate is a nice smooth white bready character. So yeah, I certainly like that about this one. But yeah, at the back of that front third of your palate, well, as I always say, on that front third of your palate, that's where you get the nice oily bubble where those juicy fruity esters roll their way out of the beer. But at the back of that front third of your palate, you do get a slightly more kind of pungenty, grapefruity, passion fruity element to it. That's the citra that's going to give you that. But as you move further forward, it mellows out, and you start to get the more Simcoe-y, softer passion fruit. And then moving further forward, you get a juicier mango-y note out of this one, and that's the citra starting to show its face as well. And then you get the softer apricot-y, papaya type things kind of sitting underneath that as well. But as you move into the front half of that front third of your palate, you definitely get the more citrusy side of this beer. This one's actually quite well balanced between the tropical and the citrusy side of things. But yeah, you can feel the really oily Amarillo orange coming out of this one. You can really feel that there, but then the softer tangerines from the mosaic are kind of just sitting on top of that. You will get a wee bit of pineapple, I think, sitting on top of the tangerine as well. So the fruity part of this beer is quite complex, and you're always going to get that when you've got 4 hops in this one. But as you just reach the kind of very edge of that front third of your palate, you'll get a wee bit of a kind of lemon limey character there, and I think that's the citra that's really showing its head there. There's a wee bit of a kind of lemony limey quality in this beer for sure. But yeah, it's got a lovely just kind of juicy component to it, which I think works very, very well. But it's got a little bit of bite to it, and that's what you at least I think you couldn't really pick up in the aroma to it. But again, it's a very easy drinking New England double IPA. For 8% it is kind of stupidly drinkable, to be honest with you. But yeah, it's another absolutely solid beer from Collective Arts, and that's what I've kind of come to associate them with over the last wee while. So thumbs up to them with this. This is a bit of a kind of more old school New England IPA. It kind of reminds me of the Amazing Haze and the GBG Beer Week 2016, the Orangey and things like that. You know, if you go back to maybe 2016, 2017, this IPA, this New England IPA is quite comparable to what you would have then, I would say. So a bit of an old school New England IPA, this one, but nothing wrong with that. Always nice for a change of pace. But yeah, I think that's a good point to round off with and go on to the mouthfeel. So for me, as I say, this beer is pretty much right in the middle of the spectrum, mid-bodied. Certainly not the thickest of New England IPAs you're going to come across. A very drinkable and kind of soft bready example of the style, I would say. But yeah, carbonation is very smooth in this one. It's just a very smooth beer. It feels quite clean in a sense as well, but yeah, a wee bit of crispness I think develops out of the beer almost with this one, the more that you drink of it. But in terms of IBUs, I think it's fairly standard. I mean, I think about 30 probably. Yeah, maybe about 30 with this one. Could be a wee bit more, of course, because it is a double IPA. It could be pushing the 40. Remember, this is my weakest point of beer reviewing, is telling you the IPAs, or the IBUs, not the IPAs. Brain's not working. But yeah, as I say, the malty side of this beer for me is quite smooth. It's quite bready leaning. It's not madly sweet, if you like. But yeah, very smooth malt based. This one, a wee bit of bite from the wheat, of course, a wee tiny touch of sweetness. But that certainly suits it. And then the fruity side of the beer for me is really nice and juicy actually. So yeah, good balance between the kind of citrusy side of things and the tropical part of the beer as well. So nice soft tropical notes and a wee bit more of a kind of zesty citrusy thing. And I think the citrusy zest maybe comes out a wee bit more the further you go into the aftertaste. But yeah, as I say, it's a lovely beer, this one, and I think it suits yeah, I think it's a bit more of an old school New England IPA, this one, so I certainly enjoyed it. But yeah, I think we can round off the review at that then. This one was the Good Monster New England Double IPA, 8% ABV from Collective Arts Brewing in Hamilton and Toronto, Ontario. Pretty much an old school sort of 2017 era, 2016-2017 era New England IPA. I enjoyed this one. So yeah, if you want something a bit more old school, I think you guys will enjoy this too. But let's leave it there. Once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Collective Arts Brewing as well. We will no doubt return to these guys at some point in the fairly near future. Hopefully we can get a few more Canadian breweries on the channel over the next little while as well. But yeah, always cool to have the chance to review some Canadian stuff for you anyway. But thank you again for watching. Check out all my Canadian beer tubing colleagues, and hopefully we can return to these guys soon. So Slange Skull, cheers. This was the Good Monster New England Double IPA, 8% ABV from Collective Arts in Hamilton, Ontario over in Canada. Slange Skull, cheers. Make sure you check out this beer, check out the brewery, and I'll catch you guys on the next review.